his blog post announcing his goodbye to the venture capital world the following paragraph: "The only way I know to be awesome at startups is to be obsessively focused and pegged to the floor of the deep end, gasping for air. I succeeded at venture capital because, for years, I rarely thought about or spent time on anything else. Anything less than that unmitigated full commitment leaves me feeling frustrated and ineffective. As you've heard me say on the show, if I'm not all in, I'm out." 18. If you're working on a particularly challenging goal, the all-in or out approach might be the only way forward, and it certainly won't hurt if you decide to follow this philosophy at least partly and greatly limit your focus. Exercise number 5, focus to the extreme. It's incredible how much you can achieve if you focus on one key goal and disregard everything else. While most people will find it impossible to have a single focus in life, there are always many obligations to attend to. Try to set aside a weekend or perhaps even an entire week, during which you'll only work on one key goal. Successful entrepreneur Craig Ballantyne suggests in his article, "You have never thought this way before, that if you want to finish your product and start a business, book a hotel conference room if you must. Pay the money upfront so you won't back out. Arrive there early and lock yourself in, and don't come out until you have a product to put online." 19. You can use this strategy to finish a long overdue project, write your first short book, publish an important blog post or article, memorize keywords and phrases in a foreign language, or complete virtually every other goal you can work on in a hotel room. If you're working on other goals like lowering your highly elevated cholesterol levels, spend the entire weekend or week paying extremely close attention to your diet by noting down every single piece of food you put in your mouth. Read a couple of books about the dangers of elevated cholesterol levels. Religiously stick to the recommended workout schedule. The point is to become as immersed in your goal as possible. Even if you can't maintain a given routine in the long term, you'll still benefit from this short-term exercise to remind you of the power that lies inside you if you double down on what's most important to you. Dealing with a failure due to a lack of focus. Quick recap. 1. The third common type of failure is caused by a lack of focus. Whenever you spread your attention over too many different goals, you'll hinder your performance. This will likely lead to rapid failure because it's impossible to reach key goals without sacrificing less significant objectives. 2. To avoid this type of failure, make sure to prioritize big goals and dedicate most of your energy to them. Realize that you can't have your cake and eat it, too. Limiting your focus is necessary for success. 3. Embrace boredom and stick to the things that are working well for you, even if they're no longer as exciting as they were in the beginning. 4. Lastly, focus on the essence of the goal you want to reach. Oftentimes you can pinpoint just one key action that will make every other action easier or unnecessary. Do this action to gain more clarity and focus. Chapter 5, Dealing with a Fear-Driven Failure. Failure driven by fear is one of the most common reasons why people fail to act on their goals or give up prematurely. There are a few different causes of fear, so let's discuss them one by one. 1. Fear of the unknown. As strange as it sounds, people unconsciously often want to fail. They subconsciously live by the motto that a known devil is better than an unknown angel. It's easier to let the things stay as they are even if you're not entirely happy with them than to be bold and venture out, seeking greener pastures. A good example of failing due to the fear of the unknown is sticking to your current day job even when you absolutely hate it. Obviously, it isn't sensible to quit without a solid plan. The failure lies in the fact that even though you hate your job, you do nothing to change it because you're afraid of the unknown. If you set for yourself a life-changing goal, this means that you need to leave your safe bubble and travel to unknown, potentially dangerous places. It's scary, so it's no wonder that many people sabotage their efforts to avoid this fear. The only solution to overcome this behavior is to slowly, but consistently, stretch your comfort zone and resist the temptation to default to security. While the need for safety is a basic human need we all share, too much of it doesn't go hand in hand with growth. If you want to take your life to the next level, you'll have to sacrifice some of that security for growth. The first time I climbed a 100 feet high cliff, 30 meters, I was extremely scared. When I stood exposed on the rock face, with the wind blowing at me strongly and surrounded by open space in all directions, I felt the temptation to ask my belayer to lower me. It would be nice to touch the ground again and feel safe, but I wouldn't have learned anything that way. I pushed ahead, overcame my fear and completed the route. After so many scary experiences, I still feel queasy or even get panicky at times. If you keep challenging yourself, those feelings will never leave you. You just learn to push through them more effectively. And don't misunderstand me, there's nothing glorious in being frightened. When I'm scared, I'm scared. I wonder why I'm yet again doing such a thing to myself. You'll absolutely hate the feeling when experiencing it, but you'll look at it with great fondness and gratitude later on when you realize how much it has helped you grow. Remember that in the end the only way to deal with the fear of the unknown is to embrace the situation as a learning opportunity, even if it's initially disconcerting. 2. Fear of rejection. Another type of fear-driven failure that keeps you stuck in the same circumstances even if you'd love to change them is failure due to the fear of rejection. A common manifestation of this type of failure is not approaching a person you find attractive simply because you're afraid they'll reject you. Working in sales also requires you to overcome the fear of rejection. If you don't overcome it, you'll have lackluster, if any, results. From a logical standpoint, as uncomfortable as a rejection can be, choosing to not approach an attractive person or try to make a sale is a guaranteed failure. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. Unfortunately, in a situation where you face a possible rejection, following the logical thought process is challenging. I know what I'm talking about. To battle my extreme shyness, I approached 50 attractive women in the street over a span of 3 months. I wasn't looking for any specific outcome other than to overcome my paralyzing fear and approach them. I didn't want to create an awkward situation or get rejected, so at first I found it extremely difficult to act. In the end, my fears were unfounded. Most women didn't mind that I approached them. In fact, many were eager to talk with me, and I discovered that being rejected by a great majority of them wasn't such a big deal. In the end, exposing myself to repeated rejections eradicated shyness from my life. Learning how to deal with rejection can change your life, too. Just like with the fear of the unknown, you immunize yourself against rejection through consistent desensitization. Forget about the end goal you're trying to achieve, making a sale, setting up a date, and aim for rejection. If your ultimate goal is to get rejected, then if you get rejected, you aren't losing anything. After all, that's what you were seeking. If you don't get rejected, though, good for you. You acted despite your fear and programmed your mind that facing fears head-on is worth it. A crucial aspect in overcoming the fear of rejection is to not let the emotions cloud your judgment. Whenever you're in a situation that causes you to withdraw because of a possible rejection, don't give yourself even a second to finally had a breakthrough. If you can't find support elsewhere, turn to books and the internet, and I'm sure you'll find reassurance there. In conclusion, if you're failing because you feel like it's you against the world, try to build a social bubble that will support your endeavors, even if it merely consists of online strangers on a discussion forum or a stack of books written by people you admire. Dealing with a fear-driven failure. Quick recap. 1. The fourth type of failure is fear-driven failure. It can be further broken down into fear of the unknown, fear of rejection, fear of losing your identity, and fear of losing connection. 2. When dealing with a fear of the unknown and a fear of rejection, the only way to prevent that is to expose yourself to difficult and uncomfortable situations in which you face the unknown or a possible rejection. The more often you do it, the more comfortable you'll get with it. Soon you'll learn how to act despite those unpleasant emotions of discomfort, and fear will cease to be a paralyzing factor in your life. 3. When you fail because of the fear of losing your identity, it's because there are certain negative aspects of your life that you consider you. If you consider obesity, poverty, shyness, or any other negative trait to be a part of your identity, it's scary and uncomfortable to throw them out. However, in the end you have to stop romanticizing the bad aspects of your life and realize that life is growth. The sooner you get rid of those bad things, the better your life will become. For lastly, people fear they'll lose connection when they start working on or reach their bold goals. This fear is not unfounded. Some people will consider your efforts a threat to their self-esteem. The best solution is to surround yourself with individuals who don't exhibit such a behavior and will actively help you reach your goals. Chapter 6, Dealing with a failure due to self-sabotage. You can set yourself up for a failure due to low self-esteem. It can result in self-sabotaging behaviors, such as, not trying hard enough. After all, you don't believe you'll succeed, so what's the point of doing your best? Exhibiting doubt, who's going to date you, invest in your business, or hire you, if you send unconscious signals of uncertainty, giving up at the first sign of trouble. Why fight, if you already decided that you'd most likely fail? Creating situations or excuses that set a person up for a failure, like a student who parties the night before an important exam. It's common for a person suffering from a lack of confidence to invent insignificant problems so they can have an excuse not to face the big ones. For example, they'll tell themselves they desperately need a new dress for a job interview and spend 4 hours shopping instead of preparing themselves for the interview. Or they'll come up with a supposedly important reason to stay up late, so when they don't get the job they'll be able to protect their ego and say that they failed because they had to stay up late. As absurd as it sounds, it isn't a rare behavior. Unfortunately, because it's so subtle, people usually don't notice they're doing it subconsciously. It's not like they consciously want to fail a job interview, but that's the outcome that their unconscious behavior produces. To overcome this type of failure, you need to take 3 steps. 1. Believe in your goal. A lack of confidence leads to a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't believe you can achieve something, and that's exactly what happens. One of the most effective ways to overcome this problem is to not develop a belief in yourself, but in your goal. When you're working on an extremely important goal, increased self-confidence will be a side effect of your efforts. I spent several years trying to build a successful business. If it weren't for my clear, deep conviction that I would literally die if I were to work for the man, I wouldn't have stuck with the process for so long. I felt so strongly about the significance of this goal in my life that, even after numerous failures, getting into debt and being just an inch from having to close up shop, I didn't lose my confidence. This is what believing in the importance of your goal can do for you. Can you imagine willingly suffering so much for a goal you sort of want to reach? Empowering story number 4, Phil Knight. Nike founder Phil Knight wrote the following words in his memoir, Shoe Dog, a memoir by the creator of Nike. Driving back to Portland, I'd puzzle over my sudden success at selling. I'd been unable to sell encyclopedias, and I'd despised it to boot. I'd been slightly better at selling mutual funds, but I'd felt dead inside. So why was selling shoes so different? Because, I realized, it wasn't selling. I believed in running. I believed that if people got out and ran a few miles every day, the world would be a better place, and I believed these shoes were better to run in. People, sensing my belief, wanted some of that belief for themselves. Belief, I decided. Belief is irresistible. 23. From then on, his life didn't magically change. While he did finally begin his work on what was to become Nike, he still went through numerous failures, setbacks, and had to deal with larger-than-life problems. However, if it wasn't for his irresistible belief, who knows if Phil would have built one of the world's largest and most recognized sports companies. To replace self-handicapping with defensive pessimism or strategic optimism when you're afraid of failure, you might sabotage your efforts to protect your ego from the crushing consequences of failure. This behavior, exhibited by creating obstacles and excuses to justify your failures, is called self-handicapping. According to researchers Andrew J. Elliott and Marcy A. Church, self-handicapping makes it challenging to reach one's goals. 24. The problem with self-handicapping is that, on the surface, you always have a perfect explanation for your actions. Even if you're hurting yourself by taking actions that undermine your efforts but protect your ego, you'll still believe you're doing the right thing. If you recognize this happening in your life, try 2 alternative strategies. 1. Defensive pessimism. Defensive pessimists set low expectations for their performance and envision possible negative outcomes. However, instead of creating circumstances that would undermine their success, they plan and prepare for the obstacles. 25. Being late. Leave much sooner than necessary. Ensure that your car doesn't need any important repairs and won't suddenly break down. Charge up your phone so you can call a cab if you can't turn the engine on. Forgetting important details about the company. Visit the company's website and memorize everything you find interesting or good to know. Read the most recent news. Find a current employee and invite them for coffee to get insider knowledge. Forgetting the fundamental things you should know when applying for a given position. Review the basics of your profession. Read a book or 2 about the most important concepts pertaining to your job. Wardrobe malfunction. Prepare your clothes the evening before the job interview. Bring a second shirt or even an entire second set of clothes with you. Assuming that everything will go wrong and then making sure that you have a contingency plan will help you overcome anxiety, build confidence, and avoid self-sabotage. 2. Strategic optimism. Strategic optimists deal with the anxiety of failure by adopting the outlook that things will end well. Instead of worrying themselves sick about their future performance and trying to plan for every single possible setback, they set high expectations, visualize success, and feel calm and in control. It takes a lot of practice to adapt this strategy if you've been a pessimist for a long time, so start small and stay patient. The process comes down to 3 steps. 1. Shifting your locus of control, the extent to which you believe you can control events that affect you. 26. From external to internal. In other words, take responsibility for your life instead of blaming everybody but you for the failure, and admit that you've achieved success thanks to your efforts, not through luck. We'll talk about locus of control in more detail later in this book. 2. Slowly stretching your comfort zone. Start with easy tasks within your comfort zone and take it from there. A string of wins, even if they're tiny, will help you build positive momentum and develop the belief that things generally turn out okay. 3. Reframing. Optimists are masterful at changing the meaning of their failures. Consequently, they don't take them personally and maintain high confidence in themselves. For example, if they don't perform well during a job interview, they'll consider it a lesson that they need to better prepare for their next interview, or they'll simply tell themselves that if they didn't perform well, it was probably because subconsciously they knew it wasn't the right company for them. I dig deeply into the topic of self-efficacy, the strength of the belief in your abilities that can help you become more optimistic, in my free book Confidence, How to Overcome Your Limiting Beliefs and Achieve Your Goals. 3. Live in a fantasy world. This will sound like a contradiction to what I've said before about being realistic, but there's a slight difference, so please read carefully. I've been criticized that I live in a fantasy world on more than a couple of occasions. And I like when people say that because it shows how far I've gone to change my attitude, which previously was as pessimistic and self-limiting as you can get. As much as I value being reasonable when setting new goals, I don't set limits for myself as to what I can achieve given enough time, and neither should you. This is a crucial tool to escape self-imposed mediocrity that is caused by the erroneous belief that you aren't the master of your own destiny. This is not about believing that you can become a millionaire in 3 months. It's about believing that if you want it to happen, you will make it happen, although in a more realistic time frame. In other words, you believe that everything is possible, but you don't keep your head in the clouds. I have a corkboard in my home office with some of my favorite quotes, and right in the center of it there are 2 quotes. 1. Nothing is impossible for a man who refuses to listen to reason, from Gary Halbert, a legendary flamboyant copywriter who is responsible for some of the most successful direct mail campaigns. If you're reading this book, I assume you're doing so because you want to build a better life for yourself. This in itself runs contrary to the behavior of a large group of people who couldn't care less about self-improvement. Understand that you'll meet with adversity and disbelief because it clashes with how those people see the world. You'll be the unreasonable one in their eyes, but don't let it define your self-confidence. All successful people have to deal with this. 2. To live an extraordinary life, you must resist an ordinary approach. From Frank McKinney, a self-proclaimed real estate artist, international best-selling author, philanthropist, and ultramarathoner, who has built oceanfront spec homes, homes built without an identified buyer, valued in the tens of millions of dollars. I often reread these quotes to imprint them even deeper in my mind, but what's more important is actually taking action in line with what they espouse. Namely, it's refusing to accept the self-limiting beliefs imposed on you by society. It's about not following the herd right over the cliff. It's about developing trust in yourself, because you're the expert of your own life and what you want it to be like. You won't always be right, but what's important is that you did what you thought was right. I'd much rather fail because I made the wrong choice than because I listened to someone else. In more practical terms, this means things like quitting a lucrative job that you hate, to do something that actually gives you joy and doesn't convert your life into a nightmare. Reasonable people would probably say you should stick to a lucrative job. It's such a bad job market, you should be happy with what you have. But in the end, is life really about money alone, or hey, maybe the point is to be happy and fulfilled? Going against the tide when you believe it makes sense. Most self-published authors undervalue their work by selling their books for $2.99. Readers often buy such books on impulse, skim through them and forget about them right away. I first broke the mold by pricing my books at $3.99 and $4.99, and then going as high as $7.99. It's only a few bucks more, but paying 2 or 3 times more for a book suddenly makes a reader respect their purchase more. Standing out, even at the risk of ridicule. Obviously, it's not about putting on underwear over your pants just to be different. A great example here is Dollar Shave Club founder Michael Dubin, who created a slapstick YouTube video promoting his new company. Instead of taking the common and boring professional angle for his commercial, he chose humor and sarcasm. Within just 4 years, it paid off handsomely when he sold the company to Unilever for $1 billion in cash. Adopting these two outlooks on life will help you develop more trust in yourself and, consequently, overcome, or at least reduce, the occurrence of self-sabotaging behaviors. Dealing with a failure due to self-sabotage. Quick recap 1. The fifth type of failure is failure caused by self-sabotage. When a person lacks the confidence to face their fears head-on, doesn't believe that they can achieve a given goal, or, even worse, doesn't believe in their worth as a human being, they'll inevitably sabotage their efforts. This behavior usually manifests by creating excuses or situations that lead to failure or inaction. For instance, a person will unconsciously choose to stay up late for some supposedly important reason so they can look tired during the job interview and reduce their chances of success. Then, if they fail, they'll be able to protect their ego by saying something along the lines of, "I didn't get this job because I had to stay up late." 2. The first step to deal with this type of failure is to believe in your goal. If you can't develop the confidence in yourself, develop the belief that the goal you're pursuing is something you absolutely must reach. This, as if by association, will help you develop more conviction in your abilities to make it come to pass. 3. The second step is to replace the strategy of self-handicapping, creating obstacles and excuses to avoid anxiety or justify your failures, with something more effective: defensive pessimism or strategic optimism. Defensive pessimists envision negative outcomes and prepare themselves for every possible setback. Consequently, they have less anxiety and perform better. To become a defensive pessimist, go through your worries one by one and develop strategies to handle them. Strategic optimists, on the other hand, assume that things will turn out okay, and that helps them manage their anxiety and perform on a high level. To become more optimistic, Shift your locus of control by claiming personal responsibility for every failure and success in your life, stretch your comfort zone to gain confidence and momentum, and reframe negative events to turn them into lessons instead of excuses as to why you're a failure. 4. Lastly, live in a fantasy world. This means adopting the belief that there are no limits. While you need to be realistic about the time frame needed to reach success, resist the social programming that tells you to remain average and conform. Dare to go against the tide whenever you feel deep inside your heart that you're right.